Welcome to Footy Kickin Good. Today we are going through our Adelaide episode. Joining me as always, my main men. Firstly, Jake Saligo's biggest fanboy, Michael Flynn.
I am a big Saligo man, and unashamedly so. I was going to swear there. I actually really do like him. He's my boy.
You love Jake Saligo.
I tried to get him off Flynn in our footy comp.
In our fantasy league.
I tried really. I offered him a good deal too.
Isn't he from Ferntree Gully? Oh, Listerfield.
He's from the Listerfield
That's where
Wolves.
Chris grew up. There's good footy pedigree out.
Good
in
footy
Listerfield.
pedigree, yeah. And beside him, the man that still calls Richard Tambling the one that got away, Christopher Paduano.
I don't think I've ever said that about Richard.
I vividly remember Chris saying that.
Yeah. Adelaide and Richmond, great.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Number one pick. Come on.
Who'd they? It wasn't a number one pick, but
Was
who'd
it-
they skip on that draft?
Franklin.
Franklin, Rufford.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Adelaide Crows. I'm excited for the Crows purely because I just really love their list. I just think they've drafted really well. They've got this Moneyball backline. I just think they're really primed to go somewhere this season.
I agree. I think they can't really do much worse than they did last year. So it's,
Yeah.
I think given
What a positive.
given the list that they had, I think given the list that they had, they definitely are better than a 15.
For sure.
Yeah.
But
sure.
I think it depends. There's a couple of guys, if they take that next step, they could easily be really competitive and knock off a few good teams this year.
I feel like they also had, that second year blues type period.
Yeah.
I feel like some of the guys that were really good in their first year are going to be back to that level again this year.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. Let's go through the ins and outs of this side. So I'll just run through the main ones. So we know they've got some great recruits in. So Isaac Cumming for one, Sid Draper, number 4th draft pick this year, who looks like a gem from all reports.
Yeah.
Alex Neil-Bullen traded over from Melbourne, Pete Ling over from GWS, and Tyler Welsh, the father-son draft pick. I don't think there's a miss there, to be honest with you.
Who's the one that stands out most to you? Let's put Sid Draper and Tyler Welsh aside. Out of the 3 recruits from other clubs, who's the one that jumps out to you?
I think in terms of I think Pete Ling's still young enough that he could really take that next step, a bit like Dawson did, where he's ended up in new colours and he's been such an important player. Pete Ling could sort of go anywhere.
I think, to be honest, I have a feeling that Pete Ling's just going to be thrown into the middle. I think they're gonna find other spots for former midfielders to go.
The thing I noticed with the 3 recruits is that they're all pretty versatile. They can play more than one position.
Neil Bullen especially. He can play anywhere.
Do you think the competition for midfield spots is going to really ramp up, I guess?
Yeah.
Because, you got Draper coming in, you still got Matty Crouch there, Isaac Rankin's been running through the middle, and now you brought in Sid Draper as well.
They do have a lot of a similar type.
Yeah.
They have a lot of inside mids from what I can tell. But I feel like having too much of a good player is not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah, not a bad thing.
They can find... I did read, I think Rory Laird is potentially making a move back to defence, which he's an all-Australian defender. So, I mean, they do have that luxury to sort of,
Do you think Rory Laird might be the most underrated player
he's
in the
one
league?
of.
Yeah, he's up there.
Statistically, he's an absolute beast, but I don't feel like he gets the love he deserves.
I think it wasn't last year. I think it was the year before.
Yeah.
Statistically, he was one of the best players all season and didn't get any love in the All-Australian.
Yeah. It's always someone that misses. And what's it called? Let's quickly just go through some of the key outs. Lockie Gallant delisted. Elliot Himmelberg gone over to Gold Coast, wasn't it? Yep. Ned McHenry, Patrick Parnell, Rory Sloane's probably the big, superstar that's kind of left that side. But I think they're in a good spot. I mean, you bring Sid Draper in, Rory Sloane goes out.
Oh, look, they've upgraded on all those blokes. Ned McHenry was a high-ish draft pick. I think he was a first rounder. He's never really come on. Was sort of a good trier, I guess. Yeah. But he's probably was never going to be in their plans going forward.
Yeah. And shout out to Tyler Welsh. I just feel like I think he was like a top 20 prospect for the last year before the draft, and he's kind of slid down the pecking order. It reminds me of just like what Cal Shadir did for the Hawks. I think he could do the same. I think he did have a shoulder injury in training the other day, so it might put him out a little while.
Do you think as well, like these guys that are father-sons where they're highly touted from a young age, do you feel like a lot of the other clubs sort of like switch off from even tracking their progress? Because it's like, well, we know Adelaide's picking him, so like...
It's not, like you're not going to put time into Levi Ashcroft because you know where he's going.
Yeah, I agree with that.
All right, boys, let's get into the talking points. So we've already kind of mentioned the new recruits. Neil Bullen coming, Peterling. Do these guys come into the Adelaide side and do they make them a top 8 side? Like, do we see Adelaide being in the top 8?
Look, I wouldn't count them out, but I don't know if it'll be them that will necessarily, like they could be the thing that tops them up, but I think it's a lot of improvement from a lot of the players already on the list. Like I think Phil Thorpe and Fogarty could have another good year, maybe even improve on it. Rochelle. And I think I think hopefully Rochelle learned his lesson from the end of last year. Like they probably needed to give him a bit of a whack. Because he's got that much potential, but he probably just needs to get on with it sometimes.
It's funny because I feel like Nick's is more of like the old school coach mold in terms of like, we don't like, like Ginnivan type players in our team.
Yeah.
I feel like Rochelle would suit Hawthorn, like a team like that, so much better because they get that freedom to express themselves.
That's the part of it because he's looking at Hawthorn, what they're doing and celebrating, and he's going like, they're having success. Maybe we should be doing the same thing. I kind of felt bad for him being pulled up a little bit. The other thing is everything looks good when the team's going well. Yeah,
if Hawthorn were going terribly last year, Ginnivan and Watson would have been
a good point.
Absolutely smashed by people in the media. But yeah, I tend to agree with Chris. I actually do think this will be the year they make that jump into the finals because they haven't made it since 2017, have they?
No,
I think
so.
It's been a while.
Yeah.
And they've as you said earlier, they've built such a nice list profile. It's a good that their core group's starting to get into that like early to mid 20s range, and I feel like almost we see these teams like Hawthorn last year with, I know I keep talking about Hawthorn, it's an Adelaide episode, but Hawthorn last year had sort of Bruce and Gunston became like sort of the they weren't the main guys. They sort of were there to complement the team, and I sort of see Adelaide going a similar way with like Laird and Crouch and these guys as like, let the young guy, even Tex to some extent, let the young guys, take over, and they're sort of there to just guide everyone. So
that's why I was actually quite surprised Tex went another year because I kind of felt like, was it time to kind of hand over the reins to Fogarty and Thilthorpe?
Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't know.
think it is.
Yeah. I kind of felt the same, but I don't know. I mean, I feel like he'd actually excel maybe as more of a sub-type kind of player. You know what I mean? Come on for that extra burst.
I'll be very interested to see how many games he goes on with this year. Because even last year with Geelong, I noticed like they opted to go with one of the young forwards. I forget his name, but then I think he sort of hit a rough patch and Hawkins came back, and I can see. I feel like you've got to give Thilthorpe and Fogarty every chance to play.
Yeah, I agree.
Well,
I probably stopped you from giving your answer, Jamie. Do you think the 3 new recruits are
a top 8 side?
Yeah, are going to help them be a top 8 side?
I actually think they will. I mean, assuming they stay healthy, I think Isaac Rankin for me is potentially the most important piece in that team.
Yeah.
I think he's
we saw it last year. Every game he missed, they were shocking.
Yeah.
And that game against my boys at the MCG, the Pies, where he
ran too far.
He did his hammy.
Yeah.
That was one of the best like individual performances. Like he almost single-handedly got them across the line.
Yeah.
Like, he's a player.
They've come close against the Pies a few times now. But yeah, moving on. Let's talk about Matty Nix real quickly, because he's heading into his 6th year. Is he probably under as much pressure as any coach in the club coming into this season.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Big time.
What do you think of him though? Like as a coach, do you think he's doing the right thing with this team? Is there any flaws? Kind of.
There's definitely flaws.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that it comes up a lot is the Crouch brothers. Like, there just seems to be, I don't know how Matt Crouch went from, what he was doing when he was young to just being so out of favour. And a lot of people have been asking for years, but then they didn't want to let him go. When they got to the trade period at one point, they still didn't want him to leave.
I do feel like Nick's is a coach that's got his favourites.
Yeah, but every coach does.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I don't necessarily agree with who his favourites are.
Yeah.
Clearly Tex Walker is a favourite of his.
Yeah.
But I do think that they're almost at a point where it's like, I think by even last year, they probably should have been looking to turn sort of some of the younger players into leaders at the football club, sort of move away from some of the more experienced guys and, get
more games to the youth, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, they got plenty of young, they have been drafting well. It's just a matter of getting the games into them. Mm-hmm. But I'll just give you, so he's obviously had 5 seasons at the Crows. 2020 he had 3 wins. 21 he had 7. 22 he had 8. 23 he had 11. So it was, increasing wins every year. Yeah. And then last year they backslid, they had 8 wins.
Well, look, in 2023, in all fairness, they should have been in the finals.
Exactly,
They did get screwed over by a poor umpiring decision that cost them in that game against the Swans.
Yeah.
And that, who knows, that might have had a mental,
toll on them.
Toll on the group that they should have been there and they didn't get to be. Yeah. But last year was a really disappointing year. I think a lot of footy media had them as like the big riser.
Yeah.
To get into the 8, and they were just
I like the side they got. I think they play a really good brand of football as well. Like it's pretty free flowing.
Yeah.
And they've got the stars now. I just feel like if everybody does improve, it'd be pretty hard for them to miss. I feel like the ladder, I don't know. I mean, you guys probably done some predictors as well. Yeah. All my predictors are like, one game could be a difference between 5th and 13th. Yeah. You know what I mean? So sometimes it just comes like you got to win the games that you're supposed to win. Mm-hmm. So hopefully they can make Adelaide more of a fortress. I feel like that might be really important.
The other issue that I've spoken about for years is their poor ability to win on the road.
Yeah,
they've always struggled on the road. If you look at their record, I think it was in 2023 they went on this stretch where it was. They'd win at home, lose the next week, and it was like win, loss, win, loss, win, loss for 10 weeks or whatever it was. Okay. And I think if they can turn Adelaide Oval into a fortress, which they definitely could, as well as the advantages from the gather round, you get an extra home game.
Yeah.
But I just think if they can pinch some of those, especially those games where it's like Essendon at Marvel, or I know they did. Beat Essendon last year, but if they can pinch some of those games against teams that are sort of around their mark, I think that'll go a long way for them.
Talking about how Adelaide and Collingwood have had some close contests, do you know the record Matty Nix has against Collingwood?
Don't think he's beaten us.
0-7.
Yeah.
And with Sydney, 0-6.
Yeah.
So I feel like those are 2 big ones you got to mark on your calendar and go get the monkey off your back.
Yeah.
And they've been real close to Collingwood. They actually probably should have won a few of those.
Yeah. No, we probably did them dirty a couple times. Sorry, Adelaide.
All right. What about the Crows' young core? So obviously, I feel like they've nailed every single first round pick they've had in the last couple of drafts. So we look at like Thilthorpe, Rochelle, Michelini, Curtin, Draper. Do you think that's...
I wouldn't say nailed because the jury's still out, but I have more faith in those guys becoming good players than getting delisted.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. But I feel like if you look at it, you've got a nice core there. Like Michelini could possibly be an ex-captain of the club.
I think he is the next captain.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, I think he's ready to break out as well. And I think they almost need that one defender who's going to be that elite level to kind of just elevate the other guys and kind of say follow my lead.
You mentioned Curtin before. Where do you think his best position is?
See, that's tough because he played. I don't know if it was just one game. Just in the midfield, and he absolutely dominated towards the end of the year.
Yeah.
I think he's starting back from reports. No, actually starting forward. He's been playing as a forward, which is pretty interesting because he's a good size to him. But I don't know where he's best. I kind of want to see him everywhere. I kind of want to see him in the midfield. Do you guys think Curtin's going to actually stay?
Don't know.
Where's he?
He's a WA boy.
Look, it probably. I mean, it probably partly depends on what those two teams are doing, and if he can get across to the right team. Like, it's not the end of the world to, those two states often have people that sort of, go from one to the other. There's often guys that are from WA in South Australia, vice versa.
Yep.
No, I think as you just said, he's probably got a lot of ability in the midfield, but he's not at the right team because the team like Adelaide don't need more midfielders.
I'm surprised because I think he'd be. I mean, he got drafted as a backman. You'd think you'd want him down there just to develop because that's probably the harder place to grow.
I feel like they're almost looking at it from the perspective of how do we fit all of our best players into one team?
Yeah.
And I think the forward line for me, especially that like half forward or even like a mid-sized forward, is probably one of their weaknesses. They do have decent tools, decent crumbing forwards. The back line to me, if everyone's fit, seems pretty stacked, especially if like guys like Miller are coming back. And I think Neil Bullen will probably play forward as well. I think based on what we saw of him at Melbourne, I think he's sort of that like can do a tagging job on like a Sicily. Well, Sicily's probably playing forward this year. But can do a job on a guy like Tom Stewart maybe, and then he can kick goals. He can find the ball. So I think forward's probably where he plays.
Yeah, I mean they've got a lot of depth now. It's just a matter of I think more. It's just I feel like the meta with the game right now is that it's the small forwards that seem to be what seems to be most effective, I guess, in trying to generate wins. So, I mean, if I'm thinking about Thilthorpe, Walker, Curtin, Fogarty, it's like it's a little bit too big down there, isn't it? How many?
I can't remember off the top of my head, but did Walker, Fogarty, and Thilthorpe play many in the one?
I don't think Thilthorpe was injured for most of last year.
Yeah, Thilthorpe only got back for the last couple of games. But he was looking good.
I think they trialled Himmelberg as well at some stages in that forward line, and they just looked too tall and slow.
Yeah. So big question marks, but I mean, we'll see what happens really. All right, guys. When it comes to individual awards, so let's start. Like, is anybody from the Crows a chance to win the Brownlow?
The one that jumps out at me that I don't know if it's, if he can even get through a season, it's Rankin.
Yeah.
To me, obviously Dawson, I feel like he'll poll his 20 votes.
Dawson, he's loved by the umps in a sense, like he's noticed. Yeah.
But I feel like Rankin, if he like plays midfield especially, he's the sort of guy that can just get like,
I agree.
He's so noticeable for like low possessions.
Yeah. It also partly, as you said 20 votes. You need 50 to win the Brownlow now. So it's like, you've really got to have that best on ground, 13, 14 times in a season to actually get up there now. So it's...
Paddy Cripps changed the game there.
Yeah.
Set the bar too high.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's going to be very, the way that the umpires vote now is just, it's only really going to be the guys who have an absolute dominating year from start to finish. It's going to be hard to win with, You
need midfield minutes as well.
Yeah.
Seems
absolutely.
like. Yeah. Coleman. Do you see? I almost think there's just so many options that the goals are going to be so spread.
They'll be spread.
Yeah.
They'll be, I said before, I think Fogarty got into the 40s.
He got 43.
Yeah, but I don't think that, I don't see him getting near the Coleman yet, and What do
you think would be a good tally for Fogarty and Thilthorpe?
It's a good question.
Together.
Oh well, let's say together.
You'd love for them just to hit 40 each.
Yeah. 80 goals between them would be good.
Yeah, I think Thilthorpe hasn't kicked more than 20 or 30 in a season. Off the top of my head, I feel like a 40 goal year would be good to get some confidence for him.
Yeah, no, I agree. Do you think Walker's any chance of just having like a supreme year? Starts off really hot, like kicks a big bag.
I don't see it.
No, how many times they play on West Coast?
That's a good question. I wish I had that off the top of my head, but
that was the reason he that was the reason he got a contract for 2024 was that in 2023 he just smashed West Coast twice.
I remember years back,
And
everybody
North.
thought he was done, and then he just came back, had this like absolute ripper season.
Yeah. Oh, look, it might be the farewell tour that sometimes happens. So he might get a couple of extra kicks at the end of a game where they're already going to win or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, Roughhead and those blokes that when they finished up had that last big hurrah. So
I was listening to Isaac Cumming speak about coming to Adelaide, and apparently he's like just a huge Tex fan. So maybe it was like part of it, like we'll keep Tex around if you come over to Adelaide. Yeah. But I think he was a big fan growing up, so it kind of makes sense why he headed that way. All Australian. I feel like maybe we'll avoid the regulars. I feel like
the one that I think should have potentially gotten one last year is Ben Keys.
Yeah,
I feel like that position of that he plays is one of the most difficult to play, and he had some really good games last year. He kicked a couple bags.
Yeah, he's very.
He kicked one against. I think it was against either Carlton or Essendon. He kicked a bag and he won them the game off his own boot.
He's very underrated. How good he is. Like if he was playing for a contender, he'd be very sought after.
Yeah.
Who else was there?
How many do we remember? How many they had make the 40 squad, or was it just Dawson?
I can't remember. I don't think Isaac Rankin's ever made the team.
No, I don't think he's ever really played enough games consecutively.
Yeah. But like sometimes all you got to do is just be that best small forward. You know what I mean? Just get yourself a pocket or a half forward flank.
I think he'll probably spread his stats across too many things. So he might end up kicking a lot of goals, but not enough to be a forward. Yeah, he'll have enough ball to get in the midfield.
I also reckon Michelini's a chance.
Yeah, I had him written down
as like that lockdown defender in the All Australian team. He's not really ever going to be a stat guy. Yeah, but I think he's a solid chance at being that. Stopper. Yeah,
especially if he breaks out.
Yeah.
Even someone like a Keane, maybe if he has a really good year. I feel like with defenders, you have to start the season really well.
Yeah.
For you to just be on the radar first. And keep it going.
Your team has to be. Your team has to almost play finals because you need your team to have kept the other teams to really low scores to make you look good.
Yeah.
They generally pick like a random defender from like a top 4 side.
Yeah. They normally do that.
Yeah.
How do you think Sid Draper will go in the with the Rising Star odds?
He'll be there and about. My question is really, will he get enough midfield minutes?
Midfield minutes, yeah.
Whereas some of the guys at Richmond, let's say, are going to end up getting more game time. They're going to stat better, I think.
If you're the coach, like, do you want to just say you can't give him midfield minutes? Do you want to put him behind the ball where you can rack him up in that Sheasel Dacos role, or do you want to play him more half forward and make him try win his own ball?
I don't know. I feel like Nix is the sort of guy to back in his trusted, experienced players over a kid that's because even last year Curtin didn't get a debut for quite a while. Point.
So I think as well it depends on how the season's going. I think if they're looking like they're going to play finals, then they won't muck around with the team too much, and he'll slot in the backline where he fits.
Yeah.
But they won't. If the season if Nick sort of sees that things aren't going well, and then maybe you just sort of throw everything all over the place and give him some midfield time, see if it works.
Yeah. See what sticks, I guess.
Yeah.
And guys, players to have a breakout year, or someone under the radar you think doesn't get enough love?
Have you got one, Chris?
I think under the radar is definitely Ben Keys, but I reckon. I think what's his name? We mentioned him just before, Peatling. I think Peatling could have a really good season.
Shout.
Yeah.
I haven't actually watched too much of Peatling. What do you like about him?
I know that he's quite versatile. I think he sort of broke onto the scene kicking a bunch of goals as a small forward. And then, when they moved him into the midfield, started to get a lot of the ball, but he's also a tackler as well.
He's a great tackler.
Yeah. So
I think he can also do a job on an opposition player. I think I've seen him do that before.
Have Adelaide used a tagger predominantly before?
I feel like maybe Berry might have done it in the past.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that sounds about right.
I feel like it's not like a key cog that,
Do you think every team needs a tagger?
Yeah.
Yep. Do you think it's important? Yeah.
I think just have one on the list. You don't have to use them. Sort of like Finn McGuinness at Hawks. You don't have to use them, but you want to have them there.
It's a good tool to have if you're coming up against a team that you know that's a good strategy to go forward with. You know, and then they're the perfect player to slot in.
In terms of underrated guys or guys to break out, the two for me that are similar are Worrell and Nankervis.
Oh, yep.
Similar sort of builds. I think Worrell's slightly taller and bigger.
Yep.
But I like the look. They seem very composed, which for young guys in defence I think is really important.
Yeah.
I think those two would be like magnets on the board. If they're fit, magnets on the board in the defence every week.
Sure, I had Luke Nankervis down as well.
Yeah.
Played 20 games last year, average 17 disposals. He just looks like just a really good fit. Good soldier in the trenches kind of guy. You know, he can play 200 games and might not do anything too flashy.
I noticed in a couple games last year, he'd get the ball under pressure and maybe like, you know, sell some candy or like do something where I was like, oh, this guy looks really composed on the ball. Yeah. So he's one to watch.
It's underrated. And obviously we've mentioned him a few times, like to break out by Max Michelini.
Yeah.
I think the world of him. I think he's really important to the success of Adelaide going forward.
Yeah,
I think if I remember correctly, you mentioned him last year as well. I think
Did I?
Yeah, I think he's
still waiting.
No, he's decent. I think he's one of Jamie's boys. I think he's called him early. So
don't hold me to it now. Nah, but he's all good. But thank you guys for watching our Adelaide episode, and we'll be back with more. Cool. Thanks.